Hi there, this is Professor Eckhouse, and I'm going to talk to you today about factoring trinomials. This is part 2. So this time we are just talking about factoring a trinomial with a leading coefficient that is not 1. Okay, so I'll get into what that means here in just a moment. All right, so I've got a little warm-up for you here. So if you could please pause the video and try to answer these questions on your own and then come back and see if you got it right. All right, so an example of a monomial. There are infinite examples, but a monomial could just be a number. It can be just a variable. It can be a variable with an exponent. It can be multiple variables together with exponents on each one. That's a monomial. A binomial would be taking any of these two and putting a plus or minus in between. So I could say 5 plus x. I could say 6 minus x squared. I could say x cubed plus 3x. And I couldn't add any more because that would not be a binomial. A binomial means it has two terms. A monomial means it has one term. A trinomial, what do you think that means? Like tricycle, it has 3 terms. And the ones we're going to see generally are going to be quadratics. So quadratics can have 3 terms. They can have 2 and they can have 1. But the ones we're going to see for factoring are going to have 3. Something like x squared plus 5x minus, 2. Okay, that's a quadratic. And it's a trinomial because it has 1, 2, 3 terms with plus or minus in between. A binomial, of course, also has a plus or minus in between. All right, so the last one here is just to practice multiplying this. So now there's 2 ways that we've talked about. One is foiling. So first, outside, inside, last must be multiplied together. The other is the box method or the area model. So I'll use that because in the end we get the same thing. So we've got 3x minus 4, and we've got 2x, and then positive 3 plus 3. Okay, so we're going to use this area model to figure out all 4 terms. So 3x times 2x is 6x squared. Let's do the bottom left. 3x times 3 is 9x. Negative 4 times 3, I'm just kind of going around in a circle here. Negative 12, doesn't matter what order you do it in when you have a box. 2x times negative 4 is negative 8x. Now remember, then we're going to combine these two. And what I want you to notice here is the first term, 6x squared, is pretty straightforward. It's just the first 2, these two multiplied together. And then the next term is either one of the ones I've highlighted. So we'd say plus 9x minus 8x, and then minus 12. So notice that before, when we didn't have a leading term here, when there was nothing here, we added these two together. It was the sum of the 2. It's the same thing, except now the numbers are going to be a little different because we have to include that coefficient in front of the x. Okay, so that's what changes things. But we're still finding the sum of these 2 terms, and these are going to be what's important in what we're getting ready to do. Okay, so now if we were going to continue, we would just combine those two. 9x minus 8x is 1x, or just x minus 12. All right, so that is multiplied. Now, how would we go backwards with this and factor it into 2 binomials? How would we go back to that? Well, I'm going to show you a trick. Okay, so this is just an algorithm. You just follow the algorithm, and once you get better at this, you can do it without it. But I would recommend starting with the algorithm. So we're going to do something called factoring by grouping. Most people at this stage of the game have not done factoring by grouping. If you have, this is going to seem easier to you. But factoring by grouping is the part of it that's a little harder. This first part we've already done. We've done this before. So we're going to use a similar method for trinomials with a leading coefficient, but we continue to factoring by grouping. Okay, so the last few steps are different. All right, so let's find A, B, and C, and then fill in the box. So why don't you pause the video and try that part, and then come back and we will finish the problem. All right, so hopefully you got a 3 here a -1, and a -10. All right, so A is 3, B is a -1, and C is a -10. All right, so the product AC is going to be 3 times -10, which is -30. Okay, so this time before, A was always 1, so we didn't really have to do much. But I set this up so that it's the same steps at this point, so that AC is always AC, right? But now you have to take into account that the A value is not 1. All right, the sum of the numbers, like we just saw right up here where I boxed it in orange, that part right there, is going to be the number in the middle, -1. So now the trick is to find two numbers that multiply to be -30 and add to be -1. In other words, two numbers that are very close to each other. How about 5 and 6? So let's do 5 and 6. One of them needs to be negative, so that when we multiply, we get this negative right here. So which one should it be so that we get a negative when we add? So it should be -6. Okay, so those are our two numbers. All right, so now here is the new part that is tricky, so you just have to follow these steps. So now the new middle term, instead of saying like we did before, x plus 5 and x minus 6, which we did before, that would not give us a 3 in the front, right? So that's not going to work. So now we need to do something different. Now these two terms right here, this is going to be our middle term. Okay, so the middle term is going to be a binomial to start with because it's two terms. So we've got 5x minus 6x, or you could say -6x plus 5x. It does not matter which one you do. I'm going to choose the first one. All right, so rewrite the original equation as ax squared plus 5x minus, so I'm going to take away that plus 6x. All right, so that's my new one. So I'm going to get 3x squared plus 5x minus 6x minus 10. Now, where did I just get all those numbers? Let's go through this first time. So here's my 3x squared. My 5x minus 6x is here, the middle term. That comes from this right here. And that adds together to make -1x. Minus 1x, or just minus x. All right, the last term is this one here. Okay, so stop and stare at that for a second. That's the joy of having a video, right? When things get hard, you can pause, you can back up, you can look at it again. All right, so now what we're going to do is set this up so that we have pairs, and we're going to factor out the greatest common factor of the first two and the last two. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this as 3x squared plus 5x, and then I'm going to change colors so you can see what I'm doing, minus 6x minus 10. Okay, so those are my two pairs of things. Okay, so looking at the black one, what can I factor out of those two? Out of the black pair? Well, I can factor an x out. Okay, so an x comes out, and I'm left with 3x plus 5. All right, now, the pink one. What can I factor out of both of those, including a negative? And hopefully you see that I'm going to factor out a -2. All right, so let's factor out a -2. And what am I left with? 2 times what is 6x? Well, that would be 3x. Double check, 2 times 3x is 6x. And there's a negative out front, so I'm good. All right, now I've got, if I factor a -2 out of -10, I'm left with 5. Be careful with your negatives. Double check by multiplying. -2 times 5 is -10. All right, so now I factored it out. Now I have to factor out the greatest common factor of the entire expression. The greatest common factor here is this and this. In other words, factor out the thing you just factored out from. I know that sounds weird, but factor out a 3x plus 5. All right, so I'm going to factor out 3x plus 5. All right, if I factor 3x plus 5 out of this whole thing right here, what am I left with? I'm left with x. If I factor a 3x plus 5 out of this thing, what am I left with? I'm left with -2. And now I have factors. Okay, so remember, factors are things that are multiplied. So I've got this factor, and this factor, and this thing is factored. Now, the last thing you should always do is check your work with FOIL. So either FOIL or use the area model. It does not matter which. Area model is a little less messy, so that's what I tend to do on the videos. 3x and 5 and x and minus 2. Don't forget the minus or it'll be wrong. All right, so I've got 3x times x is 3x squared, 5x, and then I've got 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x and negative 10. Let's put this all together. We get 3x squared. These two added together give me negative x, so minus x minus 10. Is that what we started with? Whoa, way up here. 3x squared minus x minus 10. Sure enough. So we're good. Check. We did it right. All right, so this is the answer. This is the check. Check your work with FOIL. Okay. You pause the video, give this a try, get as far as you can without any help. Okay, hopefully you gave this a try. So we've got A is 2, B is 11, and C is 12. So the AC factor is 24. The sum is going to be the B right there. So two numbers that give us 24 when we multiply and 11 when we add. And hopefully you found that to be 3 and 8. So the new middle term is 3x plus 8x. I gave you one with no negatives, so you could practice it with no negatives. All right, so now we need to do this with the 3x and the 8x here. So we need to rewrite the original equation. So we get 2x squared plus 3x plus 8x plus 12. So I just want to point out that all we've done here is we've replaced 11x with something that adds to be 11x, 3x plus 8x, so that we can now factor it. So now we're going to factor out the GCF. So I'll do the same thing with colors again, 2x squared plus 3x, and then we've got plus 8x plus 12. Okay, so let's do the black portion. What factors out? All I see is an x, and I'm left with 2x plus 3. And then what factors out of the pink portion? And I see a 4. 4 comes out of both of them. You always go with the biggest one you can come up with. And I'm left with 2x, because 4 times 2x is 8x. And then 4 times what is 12? That would be 3. I'll erase some of these extraneous marks here. All right. So now that is our factored version. So now we're going to factor out the greatest common factor of the entire expression. So that's the 2x plus 3 is going to come out, 2x plus 3. And then that's going to be multiplied by, what is it multiplied here? X, and here plus 4. All right, so that's our answer. That's our factored form of this quadratic right up here. All right, but let's check it and make sure we're good. So we're going to say 2x, and then 3, and then x, and 4. And when you add them, as you see, I don't say plus, I just ignore it. When it's negative, I put a negative in front of it. All right, 2x squared, you do what you want, whatever works for you, as long as it works. All right, so let's double check this by rewriting it. So I get 2x squared, and then the 8x and the 3x add together to be 11x, which is what we were going for, plus 12. 2x squared plus 11x plus 12. There we go. That's what we started with. So we just checked to make sure that this is the answer, and it is. Okay, so let's move on to another one. These just take a lot of practice. The minuses can be anywhere, and they just take practice. So pause the video and give this one a try. I only have these last two problems. Okay, so you should have gotten A is 15, B is 2, C is negative 1. The product AC is negative 15, and the sum is B, which is 2. So the product, two numbers that multiply to make negative 15 and add to be 2. And I came up with negative 3 and 5. You can write those in any order, it doesn't matter. All right, so now I did not give any steps here. So now we need to know, what do we do next? All right, so the next step was to say that our middle term is going to be negative 3x plus 5x, and that is going to replace this. Okay, so we're going to put this in right there in the middle. So let's rewrite it. We get 15x squared minus 3x plus 5x minus 1. And again, if you wrote the 5x and then negative 3x in a different order, the next step would look a little different, but in the end it would be the same. Try it, you'll see. It's nice to try it both ways because then things will start to kind of fall into place in your head and you'll start to be able to make sense of all of this a little bit better when you try things multiple ways. All right, so the next step is to factor out, and I didn't use my colors very well, but factor out the greatest common factor of each of these two. So let's do that. The greatest common factor of 15x squared and 3x is going to be 3x. So we get 3x times what's left when we pull 3x out of 15x squared. I'm left with a 5 and one more x. Multiply them back out and make sure you get the 15x squared, and you should. All right, and then the next one, I pull a 3x out of negative 3x. I'm left with a minus 1. So you've got to think, what would I multiply this by to get minus 3x? What would be minus 1? All right, and then the next one, let's see, nothing factors out. So I just get a 1 times 5x minus 1. And the reason I did that is so that this, you can see that these two things that pull out, you've got a 1 there. So these are, sometimes the easiest ones are the trickiest ones. And this is one that I often find people have a problem with, is when nothing factors out of it. It's really just a 1. All right, so let's pull out the 5x minus 1. And we are left with what? Well, this 3x and this 1. 3x plus 1. All right, so that's our answer. But let's see if our answer is right. So let's check this. So check. Let's do 5x and minus 1 and 3x and 1 and see what we get. So 15x squared minus 3x, 5x, and minus 1. So we've got 15x squared. Good, that's what we were going for right up here. And then we get negative 3x plus 5x is plus 2x. Is that what we had up here? Sure enough, it is. Excellent. And then minus 1. Is that what we had up here? Yes, it is. All right. So it checks. Okay, we have one more problem. So pause the video and give this a try. All right, so we have 7, negative 16, and negative 5. All right, so the product is AC, negative 35, and the sum is going to be negative 16. So we need to find two numbers that multiply to be negative 35 and add to be negative 16. I can't think of anything offhand. So let me just write the factors of 35, negative 35. So we've got negative 1 and 35, 1 and negative 35, 5 and negative 7, and negative 5 and 7. So now if I add these to find the sum, I get 34, negative 2, and 2. There's nothing. There's no more factors of 35. So there's nothing that you can come up with that will make negative 16. So this is not factorable. Not factorable. You'd have to do it with the quadratic formula or some other thing. All right, that was my last example. Thank you for watching.